Hello, my name is Aria Nakissa, and I'm assistant professor of Islamic Studies and Anthropology at Washington University in St. Louis. And I'm just taking this opportunity. Right now, I'm currently on a project where I'm trying to understand the relationship between certain projects, certain political projects that are global political projects that relate to Muslim societies in the West, in the Middle East, in South Asia, in Southeast Asia, and a lot of these projects are concerned with kind of overlapping concerns of human rights, promotion of human rights, also concerned with issues of security and counterterrorism, also issues of Islamic reform. And I've been speaking to a lot of people about how these issues fit together, and in particular the Islamic reform issue. But I also think that one aspect of this issue that is sometimes neglected is the impact of kind of global atheist movements, especially those which are targeted to Muslim populations. So I just really wanted some insight into this issue, and I think Armin is a very important voice. So I just I apologize to anyone. I've never recorded anything of this type, so this probably is going to come out very well, but I will go ahead and do my best to ask some good questions that hopefully people will find useful or beneficial.
No, you're doing great.
Okay, so please go ahead, Armin.
No, but thank you for setting this up, and thank you for letting me record it and release it on Atheist Republic. But how long have you been doing this? Just so people know that, if you don't mind me asking.
Oh, no problem at all. So it grows out of my dissertation research. So while I was a PhD student at Harvard, I was completing a PhD and a JD, and my PhD was in anthropology. And one of the things I did is I did about 3 years of research in Egypt between 2009 to 2012 on the Al-Azhar University there, which is kind of the most important hub for the transmission of religious knowledge in the contemporary Muslim world. And one issue that is evident in an Egyptian context is people are very interested with the question of the Islamic tradition and worried that if the Islamic tradition isn't reformed in a particular way, it's going to have negative political consequences. And then so there are certain people who are proponents of certain types of Islamic reform. There are certain people who are opponents of certain types of Islamic reform because they associate it with imperialism and so forth and so on. So I kind of began to develop an interest in these issues at that time, and then I published my first book. So my first book will be coming out with Oxford University Press early next year, but now I'm working kind of on my second book project. So my second book project tries to take a more global perspective and look at networks of political institutions, of NGOs, of social media corporations that are interested in promoting Islamic reform or perhaps atheism in tandem with other types of projects like human rights projects or counter-extremism, counter-terrorism projects.
Oh, that's amazing. What's the name of your first book?
The name that we have right now is the Anthropology of Islamic Law, the Anthropology of Islamic Law, Education, Ethics, and Legal Interpretation at Egypt's Al-Azhar. So it's kind of a long academic title.
And when is it going to be released again?
I believe April 2019.
And what's the name of your second book going to be?
I'm thinking of having it titled something like Human Rights, Counterterrorism, and Islamic Reform, Global History, or Global Anthropological History. I don't know, I haven't given enough thought to the title, but it's definitely concerned with these global projects, because I think that they're going to be important for the future of Muslim populations in the West and outside.
And if people are interested in getting your books, it's going to be like on Amazon and everywhere else they sell books, right?
Yeah, I hope so.
Okay, cool. All right, let's go ahead.
Okay, so one question I had, and I think it's a question that a lot of people inside and outside of academia have, is they're trying to understand Islam as a tradition, and they're trying to figure out how it might be similar to or different from other religious traditions. So in your opinion, is Islam similar to other religions? How is Islam similar to other religious traditions? How is it different from other religious traditions? And if it is different from other religious traditions, how is it different?
Oh, wow. Okay. How much time do you have?
I have a decent amount of time, maybe.
I don't know if you can. I mean, you could write 10 books about this, just one question, can't you? Like, okay, so.
Well, I'm particularly interested in it from the standpoint of promoting atheism, and from the standpoint of, let's say, promoting human rights, promoting modernity. Are there aspects of the Islamic tradition that make it more resistant to, let's say, secularization, that make it more resistant to atheism than, let's say, for instance, Buddhism, than, let's say, for instance, Christianity? If it has particular features, what are the features that make it resistant?
Okay, that's more specific. Okay, good. Well, I mean, just generally, obviously, Islam has a lot of similarities to other religions and many differences from other religions. Like a lot of atheists and also non-Muslims simplify, like, oh, all religions are the same. Oh, it's the same bullshit. I mean, no, it's very different. Just because it has some similarities doesn't mean it's the same thing. I mean, that's pretty obvious. The problem with all of them is that they're faith-based, right? But that just because they all have that problem, it doesn't necessarily mean they are as harmful as each other, even if they're all nonsense. But again, when I say nonsense, I mean if you look at it from religion trying to describe reality and trying to describe the natural world and try to describe how to live, I see them as all nonsense. But if you look at them as part of history, as part of something that is affected human civilization, I don't see looking at religion, all religions like that, they're not nonsense at all. They're actually very fascinating and interesting from that perspective, and they're part of what made our civilization today what we are. You can't just ignore and dismiss that, right? So, I always tell people that Islam is much more fun as an atheist, because it becomes a puzzle, a piece of puzzle in history that historians are trying to solve, and it becomes like a detective work rather than a guide to life, right? If you look at it as a guide to life, Islam is absolutely horrible. Text, script, the Quran and the Hadith should be completely dismissed and abandoned as a guide to life. But if you look at it as part of something that happened to humans, to many different civilizations, and why it happened, how did it happen, how did it affect us, how does it continue to affect us, then that's absolutely fascinating and very interesting and very valuable to analyze, and I think that's one part of what you're doing. When it comes to, if you're talking about similarities, I think that's a lot more shorter answer than when it comes to differences. Obviously, if you're talking about similarities, it really depends if you're comparing it to other Abrahamic religions or all other religions. If you're talking all religions, I guess the fact that it's faith-based, and the fact that they believe in some supernatural, and they have some traditions and some rituals, I guess that's where the similarities, belief in something supernatural, having rituals, I think that's where the similarities, and being faith-based, that's where the similarities end. And I think that those similarities are enough for us to be against all of them as atheist activists. But obviously, when you go to Abrahamic religions only, then the similarities become a lot more. And then when you start talking about differences, then you could fill libraries with that.
Are there any particular differences that are relevant to, let's say, resistance to secularization or resistance to atheism? Which particular differences exist in Islam that are relevant to those issues?
So, I mean, this is very interesting topic. Obviously, the main thing that people think about when it comes to Islam being resistant to any changes, and I have disagreements with people, okay, because the main difference is that the Quran itself promotes itself as a direct word of God. Other texts do not necessarily do that so obviously as the Quran does, right? And it promotes itself as a direct word of God that could never be changed, and it will always be immune to change. It will never be corrupted. So in according to all Islamic thought, every single word in the Quran is verbatim the direct word of God. Like, this is not something that you could play around with much. You can't just say that this had human influence, that this was changed, that this is just people's understanding, like some Christians say, of what happened with Jesus, but not necessarily, it might not necessarily be accurate. It was each person's perspective of what happened. No, this is the direct word of God. Okay, you can't play around with that, right? And also because it does warn about people cherry picking. The Quran itself does that. It does warn you about people that want to reform it. The Quran itself warns you about people that might want to reform Islam. The Quran itself warns you about people that want to misrepresent it or change the meanings of it. It's basically it's a very, among all scriptures out there, there's not, I don't know of any other text that has within itself built enough resistance within the text itself, not just the community, but within the text itself has built enough resistance to playing around with the interpretation or playing around with cherry picking and stuff like that. But that's what most people say when it comes to why Islam is resistance to reform compared to other religions. But I mean, we could get into this later. I don't necessarily think that other religions are up for reform either. I think when people say that Christianity was reformed, it's not that I don't see it like that. I see more Christians and Christian societies moving away from Christianity. It's not that Christianity was changed. It's more people were less obsessed with Christianity. People became Christianity became less and less part of their lives, and it became less influential, right? It wasn't a lot of people, when they want to reform Islam, they look into the Reformation started by Martin Luther, and they see that as a reason why Europe managed to come out of a backward barbaric. Oh, you sent me. I don't know why this is showing on my screen. Come out of like being very having policies and governing and living based on Christianity, and moving past that, they see the Reformation as part of that solution. But if you look at what really happened, the Reformation wasn't necessarily or directly responsible for that. The Reformation, in fact, in many aspects, was a step backwards when it comes to how women were viewed, how Jewish people were viewed, and in many other places it wasn't that much of an improvement. A lot of crimes in the name of Christianity was done under Protestants, right? So. But the only thing that you could give credit to the Reformation to is that they made protesting popular, questioning authority popular, which was responsible for eventually what made people move away from religious thinking, which is the Enlightenment movement in Europe. So I give credit more. I and many other people, obviously more people more smarter than me, give credit to the Enlightenment movement for why Christianity came out of that way of thinking. Christians came out of that way of thinking on a massive scale. And if you look at the Enlightenment movement, it wasn't a reformation. It wasn't changing, reinterpreting Christianity. It was a challenge against Christianity. It was a challenge against religion. It was moving away from faith-based thinking and more towards rational way of thinking, right? And if you look at the way religions as a memes try to adopt, it's not usually a result of self-reflection and self-improvement. It's usually a survival tactic against outside forces. It's not is religions try to adopt not because of anything that happens from within. It's because of better and more useful ideas from outside that challenges their relevance, that they get forced to change. This is why I'm against also reform movements, because reform movements are trying to make a change from within. But you know, no meme gives away its power or authority willingly. There's nothing in Islam that could be responsible for anything that could be seen as a reform, or nothing within Christianity. It's from outside of the religion. It's challenging that religion and making it, exposing it as irrelevant and a useless way to live life, that the people, well, not the meme of religion tries to adapt to represents itself as something that is relevant. And when it comes to Christianity, actually, it not only tries to keep itself relevant, it tries to it has done a very good job at trying to gain credit for a lot of the Western, what we call Western because it came out of the West. I prefer calling it Enlightenment values. It tries to gain to claim credit for a lot of the Enlightenment values that had nothing to do for them happening. Like a lot of Christians think that Christianity, for example, is responsible for a lot of human rights, free speech, superior Western values compared to the rest of the world. But it's very interesting that we didn't have many of these things for most of Christian history, and only when Enlightenment era activism started happening, all of a sudden these values started becoming more popular again. And again, if you look at Enlightenment activists, it was mostly a movement against Christianity, against religion. It just so happens that they happen in the places where Christianity was the religion. If these Enlightenment values were, I mean, for example, if you look at the similar kind of thinkers that were trying to push for more rational way of thinking about the world in the Arab world, in the golden age of Arabs. People call it the golden age of Islam. I say the golden age of Arabs because I think it happened not because of Islam, but in spite of Islam, right? It was because of the rational thinkers. The rational thinkers did not get their rational thinking from Islam. In fact, a lot of them were against Islam. Anyways, but what I'm saying, that we had similar movements in the Arab world. It just got crushed by people like Ghazali. But if the Enlightenment age happened in the Islamic world, right now Islam would be like a lot of Muslims, I'm pretty sure, would be claiming that it was claiming credit for Enlightenment values, that they would have tried to give the credit to Islam.
Okay, can I actually ask for clarification on a couple of issues? One is, you mentioned that Islam was a meme. I was wondering if you could clarify that idea a little bit. I mean, my understanding is that you're drawing on the work of Richard Dawkins, for instance. Could you give some examples of, or could you give me some examples of some memetic qualities of Islam? Like, what qualities of Islam contribute to its meme-like character, and are there particular characteristics that make Islam a stronger meme than some other forms of religiosity?
Right. I mean, anybody that uses the word meme is referring to Richard Dawkins, because he coined the term, right? Even the memes online that you see, it was Richard Dawkins that coined the term, but they have a anyways. But I mean, obviously, any form of, it's not Islam that is just a meme. Every religion or any ideology or cultural practice is a meme. I mean, if you compare Islam to, if you compare like religious memes to like genes, for example, I mean, they do self-replicate. They do pass on from one. They do use individuals like you and me as units of information to pass on their attributes from one generation to another. They just like genes that are not conscious but seem conscious. Memes, if you study them, they seem like they're conscious. They seem to try to survive, and there's an evolve. And there seems to be some. This is why a lot of people, when they look at memes and they see how they're trying to survive, they always assume that there are some people, there are some con artists always behind them making these decisions. Just like when you look at evolution, there seems to be some consciousness behind it. But just like when it comes to the natural selections of genes, memes also survive without necessarily some conscious, powerful entities behind them making these decisions, right? So, like, if you look at the Islam as a meme that has survived, it wasn't, a lot of atheists, for example, say like, wow, look, this is very clever that they have these attributes, that it made it, they did this on purpose so that it survived. But if you, like, let's say like you have a map of the planet and you just randomly pick ideologies and just throw it on the map, right? And just like come up with just random beliefs and rituals for each of one of these memes and just throw it all everywhere on the map, right? And then just let evolution of memes do its job. Let's say you put 200 memes, right? And then fast forward 1,000 years, obviously the memes that have attributes to survive the most are going to last longer, and they're going to, I think like after 1,000 years or 2,000 years, you put 200 memes on the map, but then you're going to see that there's only 5 left, and they're all over, like even the 200 memes, if each one of those had like a small portion of the geography covered, now each one of the 5 that are left, they're covering a much wider area, and now you have only like 4 or 5, right? Big ones.
So,
right?
You mentioned that when you would speak with some other atheists, or some atheists had mentioned that there were particular characteristics of Islam that seemed particularly clever, or that contributed to its spread at the expense of other forms of religiosity. Are there any traits that come to mind, like, for instance, endorsement of conquest, or endorsement of certain gender relations that lead to high fertility, or are there any particular characteristics that among the atheist community are associated with the strength of Islam as conceptualized in terms of a meme?
Well, I'm trying to find a book by Dr. Darrell Ray. I can't find it right now. I know I have it somewhere here, but it's called Sex and God. And this is not just Islam, but this is like a lot of Abrahamic religions. And I know a lot of people, when it comes to Islam, they always go to violence and jihad, and there's plenty of examples of that, like that. But here's another very interesting example. I always ask people, for example, well, again, this is Dr. Darrell Ray. I'm not necessarily saying this is true or not, but this is a theory that people could look up and see if it's true or not. But why, for example, masturbation is wrong in Abrahamic religions? Why is religion against that? There's nobody being harmed, right? There's nobody is attacking anybody. Nobody is taking away anything from anybody. Why is that considered a harm? Why is that considered a sin, right? And I don't know if it's a theory or if it's a hypothesis. I think it's a hypothesis. Is that this is something that this is a sin that most young men will fail at. This is something I will definitely, most people would know it's a sin, but will do it anyways. And they will feel disgusted about themselves. They will feel that they are impure. They will feel that there's something wrong with them. They will feel that they have a disease that needs to be cleansed. And when you get convinced that you have a disease, that there's something wrong with you, you have to go to the people that have the cure, and that would be the church or the mosque or the religious authorities. This is it's a very interesting strategy to tell you that doing something, you doing something is disgusting, and making that thing that is disgusting something that you know most people will fail at not doing, and then you convincing people, well, you have the cure for your disgusting behaviors, for you to always feel dependent on the system and on the religion to purify yourself, right? And again, this doesn't mean that some people got into a room and decided, like, hey, wouldn't it be this is a smart idea? And again, I don't know how true this is. This is just a hypothesis, but if this is true, it doesn't mean necessarily that some religious authorities decided that, like, hey, let's make masturbation a sin just so that we keep people tied to the religion. That was like, there wasn't like some con artist or some evil master plan like that behind it. It's just that, again, if you randomly have, even if you randomly have attributes of each religion, the ones that have all these little things that make them survive longer will survive longer, right? Which is also very, and again, this if you look at it this way, a lot of the what we see crazy part of religions, like a lot of things that don't make any sense for the best interest of individuals, if you look at it that way, they start making sense for the survival of the meme. You know what I mean? Like, for example, another theory, and again, I don't know if it's a theory or hypothesis, but is that the more crazy the rituals are, the more commitment you're showing to the tribe by practicing those rituals, right? And the more committed you are to that tribe, this better it is for the tribe. And this is the problem with a lot of people that argue that, oh, religion must be good for something, that's why it survived for so long. I mean, these religions have been around for thousands of years. How could you possibly think that we would be okay without them, right? But the thing is that their survival just means that they have been good for the meme, not necessarily good for the individuals. Like, if you look at, for example, our genes, if you consider them conscious, I know they're not conscious, but I mean, a lot of people, when we talk about genes and evolution, we talk about them as if they're conscious. Just like you say, oh, my computer is thinking. You know it's not thinking, but it just seems like it's thinking, right? But so when we say selfish genes, obviously genes can't be selfish, but people understand what you're trying to say, right? But if you look at what our genes trying to do, and again, when people get picky when I say trying because they're not conscious, but you know what I mean. They're trying. What matters to the genes is their survival, right? And all the fears and all the pleasures that we have is a tool that the genes are using to basically. They're the puppet master, and we're the puppet, right? We get hungry because they need energy for us to stay long enough to pass our gene to the next generation. We get horny because they want us to have sex and pass our genes to the next generation, right? So they're the puppet masters, and we're the puppet. If you put your hands on top of a stove, you want to put your hand away because the gene's survival is now a threat. They basically that is when you feel pain. That's your genes torturing you for their own survival. But what happened is that at some point, when you become when self-awareness becomes a tool in the toolkits of the genes, the problem is that self-awareness backfires on the genes, because then some of these tools becomes our goals. What's a tool for the gene becomes the goal for the individual. As an individual, we don't really care about the survival of a gene. Pleasure used to be a tool for the gene, but now pleasure becomes a goal for us. And we want to satisfy our pleasure without necessarily satisfying the goal of the genes. That's why if you use condoms, you're satisfying the pleasure without actually necessarily doing what the gene was intending you to do.
Okay, that's very helpful, but I know that your time is limited, so
I want to get into the meme, for example. So, okay. When you go to the meme world, right? Again, the memes are not self-aware, but the relationships between the genes and humans is basically very similar to the relationships between humans and memes, right? So we are now the carriers of these information, and the memes is basically like how these units of information or books or computers, right, how they manifest themselves, right? But the thing is that this relationship, the difference between this relationship is that unlike the relationship between genes and individuals, we are self-aware and the memes are not. So we still manage to outsmart, like we notice that the memes are going, when the memes are going so far out that we notice that, okay, this is not good for the individual, I think we manage to somehow hopefully fight against memes that are against the individual interest because we're self-aware, right? Mm-hmm. And basically the atheist movement is part of that. The atheist movement is, not letting the memes do to us what we humans did to our genes. Right, so we are motivated to have our goals to satisfy our goals in the expense of the genes, but we don't want our memes to satisfy the memes' goals in expense of us individuals. And the atheist movement is basically fighting against some of those memes, specifically religious memes. But go on. Okay, so I had a question pertaining to human rights issues. Many people who will promote Islamic reform among Muslim populations or in various places in the Muslim world, they say we want to promote Islamic reform as a means of promoting human rights, because an unreformed Islam is going to somehow inhibit the spread of human rights. Do you see the promotion of atheism as a mechanism for promoting human rights in the Muslim world? And if so, would you mind elaborating on that topic? Yeah, well, I mean, this is ties into exactly what I just said right now. The point is that when we say about human rights, we're talking about the misery or the happiness that people experience, right? And what I'm saying is that memes like Islam, Christianity, communism, Nazism, nationalism. I know people don't like that what I say, and other memes like this are basically do not necessarily serve the individual, right? So atheism is basically a fight against some of these memes, and the idea of God, the idea of faith itself, the idea of basically living our lives and coming up with ways of guides to our lives, guides to politics, guides to our relationships with each other, guides to finding meaning in life, guides to finding significance and community based on ideas that are not scientific, are not evidence-based, are based on ancient scripture that were written by people that had very limited understanding of how our minds work, how the universe works, how anything works. Is obviously not destructive. It's obviously counterproductive when it comes to human rights, and not just human rights. Anything that influences how happy we could be, and anything that influences avoiding misery and pain. Obviously, it seems to me, it should go without saying that if the more our belief systems is based on reality, the closer our beliefs matches the real world. Obviously, it will never be exactly matching it. Our belief will always be a little bit different from what reality is, right? We will never know what truth is 100%. But the closer I think it's self-evident that the closer our belief system is to reality, the better, the easier, the better outcomes we're going to have. The more the more our conclusions are going to be beneficial to humanity, right, and to anything else that is conscious.
And do members of the Atheist Republic, when they're thinking about their atheism and the effects of their atheist activism, are they primarily interested, and perhaps they have different motivations, but when they are motivated to engage in atheist activism, are their concerns primarily about kind of just having a factual view of the world, or do many of them see themselves as proponents of human rights, or the reason why they want to, for instance, promote atheism is because they want to ensure that all populations, including Muslim populations, are able to embrace human rights norms?
Okay, so first I need to make it clear that I don't speak for everybody that is a member of Atheist Republic, and also Atheist Republic as a community doesn't speak for all atheists, right?
Okay.
Or the atheist community, or any atheist community outside of Atheist Republic itself, right? So when it comes to atheist activism, I think there's two separate atheist activism that we are engaged in both. One of them is creating a community for atheists, and the other one is promoting atheism, right? And I know a lot of atheists have a problem with promoting atheism, but I'll defend that. If we can, I don't know if we want to get into that or not, but when it comes to creating a community for atheists, there is not just one community. There are many different atheist communities, right? And I think for our community, what we're trying to do is have very limited rules and standards. Like, it's just very basic: no homophobia, no racism, no threats of harm, no scams. And other than that, the door is open to all atheists, right? Left-wing atheists, right-wing atheists, non-political atheists, atheists that are not activists at all, atheists that are just feel, demonized, ostracized, atheists that are looking for other atheists, atheists that are interested in finding people to debate and have discussions with, atheists that don't want, atheists that are just looking for a community without necessarily talking about religion or atheism at all. Basically normalizing atheism, showing atheists that there's a lot of other atheists out there, protecting atheists from harm. Like, for example, many atheists we disagree with, but we welcome them. Many atheists are not even skeptical. Many atheists believe in other delusions, believe in ghosts, believe in spirits. But when it comes to building a community so here's the thing: some atheist communities don't welcome those kind of atheists, right? Our atheist community, our Atheist Republic community, we're trying to, and I'm not saying they're wrong, right? Every atheist community has its own goals and intentions. What we're trying to, when it comes to building a community for atheists under the name Atheist Republic, we're saying, okay, we might disagree with you, like you might believe in, I don't know, some conspiracy theories that we don't like, I don't agree with, but the point of building our community is that all atheists do not deserve to be discriminated against for the sake of their atheism. They don't deserve to be wronged because of their atheism. They don't deserve to be oppressed. They need to be able to be open about their atheism. They shouldn't feel shy about or isolated because of their atheism. And when it comes to that purpose, we open the door to all atheists, even atheists that are not, we don't see eye to eye with, right? So that's the community building part of the activism, right? And again, there are many, when people say the atheist community, some people point out that it should be communities, because there are many different communities. They all have, and none of them speak for atheism. Atheism is nothing but other than a lack of belief in God, right?
And then in terms of the community mechanisms, the community building mechanisms that are associated with Atheist Republic, for instance, the consulates and whatnot, I think you mentioned at some point that there were face-to-face gatherings. Would you mind expanding upon that a little bit? Like, how often are the gatherings? How many people come to the gatherings? Is there any way you can give us some sense of how this community building works?
Right. I mean, the thing is that each we have consulates all around the world in every major cities and in major city and in cities that we don't have consulates. When there is a demand and people come and ask for a consulate, we start them. And it really depends on which city you're talking to, and it depends on how active the members are there. What we try to do is give some level of autonomy to the people that start organizing their own consulates in their city. We have very basic rules that they all have to have, which is no racism, no homophobia, no scams, no threats of harm. But then they themselves, each city's admins or whoever starts managing the group, might want to add their own rules. And again, this is up to them. This is why we call it the Atheist Republic, right? Not the Atheist, So, but the only other rule we have is that the members of each consulate need to be support their admins. Like they need to be, at least most of them, be saying like, "Yep, we're happy with the admins that we have," right? And if they're happy with the admins they have, how often they meet, what they do is really up to them. Again, we know that the admins of each city, they understand their local,
Cool. Can you give me a little bit of a sense of how, for instance, Vancouver? My understanding is that you live in Vancouver.
Yeah, I mean,
but
again,
how often
Vancouver is not yet that active. I'm going to change that, but I think some of our most active cities are a lot of cities in Mexico, India.
Could you give me an example of a city in Mexico? And let's say, for instance, Mexico.
Can I get you in touch with the consulate? I mean, I'm not involved in the day-to-day operations of each consulate, but I can get you in touch with the head of each one of these consulates, and you could talk to them. Malaysia, I don't know if they would. I mean, I sent you some stuff about some news that happened with Malaysia. That's a very active consulate that I love. But again, our consulates in the Philippines are very, very active. Mexico, India.
Yeah, if you don't have the information available on you, we can just pursue it later. It's no problem.
And I have to clarify, Atheist Republic has grown to so much more than I ever envisioned without me necessarily, without me being involved. Like, because there's the secret to our growth is lack of micromanagement. We basically empowered people to just take this as far as they want to take it. So it's really impossible for anybody to necessarily be involved in everything that Atheist Republic is doing, because it just grew into its own.
No, it's understandable.
Right. But again, this is why we also get a lot of criticism coming directly at us, because there's a lot of things posted on our page or done by consulates that people come to us and be like, "What the hell is this? Why is this right wing? Why is this left wing? Why is this pro this? Why is it pro that?" And like, listen, Atheist Republic just reflects and amplifies the voice of the community. That's why it's all over the place, right? That's why you see some post that is pro-Buddhism and then another post that is anti-Buddhism, because it just reflects the diversity that we have in our community. Again, atheists as a whole don't have much in common other than a lack of belief in God, and I think that's a good thing, because our differences shows, it shows that we could. Here's an example I give, like the gay rights movement, right? Being gay is nothing other than being attracted to people of your own gender. That doesn't mean, but when the gay rights movement happened in the West, which is now become a very successful movement, made people more accepting of gays, it did not require. I mean, I'm sure there was a lot of internal drama and everything, just like every movement, but they managed to become very successful, even though these people had nothing in common other than being gay, right? You have right-wing gay people, you have left-wing, you have religious gay people, you have atheist gay people, you have non-political gay people, but the gay rights movement became very successful. And the interesting thing is that you don't actually have to be gay to be part of the gay rights movement, right? You could support, and if you're gay, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're part of the gay rights movement, right? You could be a straight person that is part of the gay rights movement, and you could be a gay person that is not part of the gay rights movement. So I see non-religious people that support atheist movement as part of the atheist movement, like, because they are they are Christians and Muslims, even though we disagree with them, that see something wrong with being we're demonizing atheists, and they are our allies when it comes to normalizing or making atheists accept it. And
okay, so you've been very helpful in terms of clarifying the community building element of Atheist Republic. Now, you also mentioned that there's an atheist promotion element, and that you think it's good to promote atheism. Can you talk about why you believe that it's good to promote atheism, particularly among Muslim communities? I mean, generally, but also in particular with reference to Muslim communities.
Okay, well, first of all, the main critique that we get from people is like, oh, now you're just like Christian evangelists or Muslim preachers if you go out and tell people about atheism, right? And I, but I say that, Christians and Muslims should be able to advocate, promote Christianity and promote Islam, right? In fact, I don't understand most Muslims that don't, because most Muslims, one time I went to a church. I was invited to a church, people knowing there I was an atheist, and they were very friendly, very nice. And this one Christian person comes to me and says like, "Oh, so you're an atheist?" And I say, "Yeah." And he says like, "Okay, don't worry, I'm not gonna try to preach to you or try to convert you." And I asked him, why are you not trying? Like, do you think that I'm gonna go to hell if I die as an atheist? And he says like, "Yeah, but that's for God to decide. It's not up to me. I say live and let live and all that." And like, wait, but don't you care? Like, don't you want to? Like, you really think if I die as an atheist, I'm gonna go to hell, and you're not even gonna attempt to try to save me, right? I mean, I understand that some Christians, when they're debating atheists or other people, for them it's not about saving anybody. For them it's about winning an argument. But there are many people with good intentions that actually genuinely think that they're spreading Christianity is an act of kindness. They're saving your soul, right? And
would it be accurate to say that promoting atheism among Muslim populations is saving them in a sense, or conferring particular benefits upon them? And if so, can you elaborate on that point?
Yeah, I mean, again, exactly. So here's the thing, right? If you are looking for a treasure, right, and you're going into like a field and you have a map, and your map, my map, it does not reflect the realities of the ground at all. It's completely, everything is misplaced. But your map is not completely accurate, but pretty close to exactly where everything is, right? And I take my map and you take your map, and we go look for this treasure. I'm pretty sure you're going to find it before I do, and I'm probably never going to find it, right? So this is how I see the belief system. So I think that a lot of people, when they think about cost of religion, they think about suicide bombing, war, and stuff, and they say like, you know what? As long as they keep their religion to themselves, it's fine. I don't care, right? But I think that's a very selfish way of looking at it, because even here's an example. If you think about, like, let's say a father, a man that is very religious, a religious Muslim, right? That doesn't hurt a fly, goes and prays, goes to the Hajj, gives zakat to the mosque or whatever religious authorities, depending on the country, and does all this Islamic rituals, but hasn't heard a fly, and is not an extremist, spends a lot of time reading the Quran, praying, all of that, right? So you're like, okay, this person is just practicing Islam in their own private life. That's not a problem. There's no victims here, right? And my response to that is like, there is a victim here, the man, right? He is a victim of this meme. He's dedicating a lot of time and resources to something that is not real, and it's not up to us to decide that. A lot of people are like, oh, it's not up to you to decide that he should be an atheist. I'm like, well, it's not up to you to decide that he shouldn't have an option, right? A lot of people say, why can't you just let people believe what they want? And I'm like, when did we force atheism on everybody? What are you talking about? Did we go and force our content? Did we put a gun on their people's head and tell them to renounce their religion? Why are you denying them an option? We are just putting first of all, we're not going to them. We are putting everything up on our platform, on our website, on our Facebook page, on our YouTube account, on our own podcast. They're coming to us, right? They're curious enough to come to us. We're not going to them, right? It's much easier than ever before for you to be able to control what you see on your feed, what what books you read. Like, if you don't like a book, all you have to do is not read it. That's what Salman Rushdie said, right? But the people that say that you should let them believe what they want is very ironic, because they're saying that if you want to let them believe what they want, then you should not deny them all the options, right? If they're only exposed to Islam, then you are not letting them believe what they want. The only way to let them believe what they want is to show them all the alternatives.
In your experience, when Muslims in particular embrace atheism, what are their primary motivations? Are there motivations that they find Islam problematic at an intellectual level, that there's not evidence for it, or is it because they primarily because they find it morally repugnant, because it conflicts with certain human rights standards, or is it? I
don't know. I can only speak for myself, and I don't have access to any polling on this for atheists. Right, so I cannot, and I don't know what, I cannot speak to. Every example that I make from the atheist community is, I don't know how representative. Like, if I say many atheists say this, many atheists say that, I don't know how common those.
So how about, without putting specific figures on it, are there certain recurring patterns that you've seen in terms of Muslim atheism? I know that you can't give any kind of percentage breakdown, or perhaps even say which one is the most common, but have you noticed particular patterns that lead people to leave Islam?
Oh, to leave Islam?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think unlike my own path out of Islam, many people that have left Islam had more, their problems were more based on the inhumane parts of Islamic teaching and practices, the verses and the hadiths that they found inhumane or unkind or violent or barbaric. That was not my path out of Islam. My path out of Islam was more based on a lack of evidence for the existence of God. But I'm not necessarily saying that what they're saying is wrong. I mean, logically, what they're saying makes sense. Some people have emotional path out of Islam, like bad experiences, right? Some people base it more on logic, some people base it more on a combination of both bad experience and logic. So, but for example, when I left Islam, I was still in Iran, I made my first atheist community online on a website called Orkut, just to see how many other people, if there are any other people in Iran at least that are like me, because I felt pretty lonely, and that was eventually what gave birth to Atheist Republic, because I felt pretty lonely and I wanted to find other people online, and that's how it all started. But then I found a lot of people in Iran that were atheists, and we were all very surprised on how many other atheists are out there that are atheists. But what I noticed very soon is that they are all sharing, not all, a lot of them were sharing verses from the Quran that they were like, what the fuck is this? Look at this verse. And I noticed that was what they were more interested in. I mean, that I found it very interesting as well, when a lot of the things that they pointed out was things that I read, but I read it just reading the Arabic part of it, but not necessarily paying attention to the translation. But then when they pointed out, I was like, no, that can't be in there. And then when I looked it up, I was like, holy shit, that's in there, right? So, but this was like their favorite pastime to show all of this stuff in the Quran. But that wasn't my path. Even though I was interested in everything they had to say, that wasn't my path out of Islam.
In terms of promoting atheism among Muslim communities, are there certain techniques that are used more with Muslim communities than other religious communities like Buddhists or Hindus? Or you just kind of use people in your, I know that you can't speak about Atheist Republic as a whole because it's very decentralized,
Right.
but in terms of the techniques that you've seen, are there particular techniques or methods that people use when they are engaging in atheist activism with respect to Muslim communities as opposed to, let's say, Buddhist communities? Because someone might, I'm not sure this is a correct argument, but someone might say, oh, when it comes to Buddhism, maybe, for instance, citing verses on violence are not as effective. Right. Or when it comes to Buddhism, maybe, for instance, citing human rights violations by Buddhist populations are not as effective. I'm just curious in terms of the strategies and the rhetoric that one might use within a Muslim community.
But I mean, there are a lot of similarities, right? Like planting a seed of doubt when it comes to challenging faith-based systems. I think when it comes to that, there's a lot of similarities. But I guess the difference is, again, going to the scripture. But also what I've noticed is that a lot of more serious Muslims have an appreciation for people that know a lot about Islam, right? Mm-hmm. And even though they might be very much against your position, I think what I've noticed is that when they see how much you know about history or different hadiths or the Quran or the life of Muhammad, they seem to have an appreciation for that. Not all of them, but a lot of them. Even they don't respect your conclusion, they do respect that you took the time to actually understand what you know. And when the thing is that serious Muslims, again, it really depends on the Muslim you're talking to. And I think what the most effective strategy is to first see what kind of a Muslim you're speaking to, right? Before you actually come up with a plan of discussion. But
are there general classes of Muslims that one could talk? So, for instance, imagine you want to promote atheist activists among Muslims, and you're trying to pick out strategies.
Right.
Do kind of Muslims fall into two categories, knowledgeable and non-knowledgeable, or are there additional categories that one needs to take into account?
So I categorize Muslims as nominal Muslims, minimalist Muslims, and then I guess it would be conservative Muslims. Mm-hmm. Right? And then cultural Muslims, which are technically not Muslims. So nominal Muslims are people that are that basically do not do anything Islamic. But if you ask them, you're a Muslim, they say, yes, I'm a Muslim. Do you believe in Allah? They say, yes, I believe in Allah. Do you believe Muhammad was the prophet of God? They say, yes, I believe that. Do you believe the Quran was the word of God? They say, yes, I believe the Quran is the direct word of God. But other than that, they don't pray, they don't fast, they don't go to the mosque, they drink alcohol, they have sex before marriage. There's nothing in their day-to-day lives that you could point to and be like, oh, that's Islamic. There's nothing like that. But they're, by definition, because they believe in those things. I mean, a lot of people are like, well, why would you be a Muslim or call yourself a Muslim if you don't practice? Well, technically, by definition, if you believe in those things, you're a Muslim even if you don't practice it. You're not just a very good Muslim, but you're still a Muslim, right? So I call those nominal Muslims, right? Because Islam is based on belief, not based on practice, right? So you have nominal Muslim, then you have your minimalist Muslims, which are the people that believe in all that, but also do the bare minimum of what you need to do, right? So they pray 5 times a day, they fast during Ramadan, and that's about it, right? They don't drink alcohol, but, you know, praying is just like something you do every day. They don't think about it. They're not even thinking about God when they're praying. It's just like brushing your teeth. It's just the thing you do. And other than that, the rest of their life is not focused on Islam. There are more important things. They are thinking about their career. As soon as praying is over, they're thinking about what maybe even while they're praying, they're thinking about lunch. But they are the minimalist Muslims. They're just the bare minimum things you do as a Muslim, and that's about it. And then you get to, and again, this is not like a clear-cut categories that you have a lot of people in between. Then you have more serious conservative Muslims that I don't know if it's conservative is the right word, but the Muslims that I guess maybe we could have two categories of serious Muslims, right? These are people that actually try to understand Islam, try to know what is the Islamic way of living, take Islam seriously, do prioritize it in their decision making in their lives, and then when it comes to that, then you have two. Among the people that take it seriously, I guess there's three paths to that. Either you look at the text and be like, okay, you read it literally and be like, this is, I guess, how I need to live, and that leads to you becoming a conservative Muslim. Or you read it and be like, okay, this is bullshit, what the hell? I can't believe this is in there. And you become an ex-Muslim. Or you become a very fringe minority. Again, I can't express how fringe this is, right? A fringe minority that reads the text, tries to come up with gymnastic arguments to make verses that are telling you to do something barbaric or something that is unethical, and try to come up with a way to make it seem like it means something else, right? And this is very fringe. Most people that take the text seriously and don't like it become ex-Muslim, right? The problem with the reform movement in Islam is that, given that how fringe this number is, they try to inflate the numbers to represent how successful Islamic reform is by adding up all the minimalist Muslims and all the nominal Muslims to the number of reform Muslims, right? Because if you add up all the nominal Muslims and the minimalist Muslims, then that number looks huge compared to the conservative Muslims, right? And you're like, look, most Muslims are peaceful people that are living their lives without being like crazy and doing crazy shit, right? But again, those Muslims are most Muslims that are really not trying to actively follow Islam, or Islam is not a big part of their life, right? But if you take away the nominal Muslim and the minimalist Muslim, then the Muslims that take Islam seriously and try to take scripture seriously, then if you compare the what's remaining, which is the reformist Muslim compared to the conservative Muslims, now the conservative Muslim part looks much bigger than the minimalist Muslim and than the reformist Muslim, and the reformist Muslim part looks very, very small. Even and again, the radical jihadi Muslims are of a subcategory of the conservative Muslims, right? And I think the reformist Muslims are an even smaller fringe group of people than the radical jihadists. As much as people say, oh, ISIS, this is a small tiny percentage of most Muslims, well, I say, well, the reformist Muslims are even a smaller fringe. I mean, even if you look at, go on, sorry.
So if you're trying to, let's say, approach so is it worth, in terms of atheist activism, is it worth targeting, let's say, reformist Muslims and conservative Muslims, or are the only ones that are really efficient in terms of one's use of time kind of the nominal Muslims or the minimalist Muslims? Here's the thing. I go to conservative Muslims with an audience of nominal and minimalist Muslims. Well, I mean, the nominal and minimalist Muslims are the majority of Muslims, right? Most Muslims, just like most people, don't think about philosophy or politics. They have other things in their lives that they care about, right? That's why most Muslims are nominal or minimalist Muslims. But the problem with the nominal and minimalist Muslims is that their large numbers is providing cover for a barbaric ancient ideology that needs to die, to be honest. So they're unknowingly providing giving authority to something that it needs to just go away. So that's why I do want to target them. The thing is that the conservative Muslims are the ones that are mostly interested in talking to you, right? And the thing is that even if they don't change their mind, they're the people that come and consume that content. There's a lot of skeptics from the Muslim community that do consume that content, so you're changing their minds, and you're planting seeds of that. And I'll clarify about what the goal is when you're talking about when you're reaching to Muslim, because it's not always outright atheism. It's not reform, and it's not always
outright atheism. I'll tell you, because people say, oh, reform is a baby step to atheism, and I'm like, no, it's not. It's a step in the right direction. The thing is that the conservative Muslims and the ex-Muslims have in common is that they actually are being very realistic about the verses that they're reading. They seem to be more willing to accept the truth and try to live and speak according to what they think reality is, versus the reformist Muslims that are, good people that they're just trying to find excuses for what their religion is saying. So they want their reality to reflect their belief rather their belief. They try to represent they already made up what they want, and they want their belief system to match that. But people that become conservative Muslims or leave Islam, they like, no, reality doesn't give a shit about what I want. I need to find out what is true, right? And I need to live and act and say accordingly. So I think there's an appreciation, even though conservative Muslims and ex-Muslims are very much against each other, I think they get to talk to each other more because there's an appreciation for living and speaking according to what we think reality is. They think there's a God, this is God's word, this is how you should act and behave. And I think conservative Muslims don't have this. Again, this is based on my experience. I don't know how common it is. They have less appreciation for reformist Muslims. Again, a fringe group of reformist Muslims, which gets a lot of attention, unlike the ex-Muslim movement that needs to get more attention. But anyways, we could get into that. They don't have respect for that because they see them as misrepresenting Islam and obviously clearly lying about the true meaning and nature of the verses and the hadiths, right?
Okay, and can you go ahead and discuss a little bit more the question of whether reformist Islam is a step towards atheism? Because I've heard that argument made a lot, and can you go? I've heard that argument made, so it appears that you do not think that is a good argument or a good strategy. So why isn't reform as a step towards atheism like a good kind of intermediate position? Because I've heard a lot of people argue having Muslims engage in atheism or having Muslims accept atheism directly, it's not practical, it's not something that people are willing to do. So because that's not possible, it's just better to promote Islamic reform as kind of an intermediate position.
No, reform is an excuse for stop thinking about difficult parts of Islam, right? Nominal and minimalist Muslims, they just see one reformist leader that says like, hey, this Quran verse is not violent. They're like, okay, he said that, I don't have to think about it. There's nothing in Quran that promotes wife beating. This is uncomfortable for me if my religion actually promotes that. Just stop thinking about it. I have some imam somewhere that said that this doesn't promote wife beating, right? It's an excuse for not thinking and not considering difficult, uncomfortable positions, right? Again, and the atheist movement, when it comes to promoting atheism and fighting religion, my understanding was it was supposed to fight religion, not replace one religion with a different religion, right? Which is a different Islam 2.0, right? That's not the goal, and that's not the most effective to do. You don't fight delusion by replacing one delusion with a different delusion. You fight delusion with facts. Again, a lot of people have a problem with the word delusion. I understand that, but the thing is that, like, you can't just expect 1.6, 1.7, 1.8. I don't know which one is the most accurate one. Let's say 1.7 billion Muslims to just leave Islam. You need baby steps, or some people call me an atheist fundamentalist, an atheist extremist. If you want people to just either atheism and nothing else. Armin, you're an extremist because you only accept atheism, nothing in between. And like, no, reform is not in between. Reform is Islamic reform is just giving people another fairy tale. It's not true. It's not fact based. What is a baby step is doubt. doubt is a baby step, right? You don't, you know, when you introduce atheism to Muslims, what, you know, many people, first of all, have, because of what we do, have left Islam and are now atheists. So a lot of people that say it doesn't work, they're absolutely wrong, right? We know a lot of people have completely abandoned Islam and are now atheists, and that has worked. We have countless of examples, way more than people that used to be fundamentalists and now they're reformists because of anything the reformists say. Even the reformist movement leaders didn't become reformists because of anything in Islam. If you actually listen to their stories and listen to their path to out of radicalism, you can see that it was things outside of Islam that convinced them, nothing within the Hadith or within the Quran. So I don't understand why they would prescribe Islam as a medicine to radicalism when that wasn't used on them. Anyways, so we have had a lot of people success with a lot of people leaving Islam, but even larger than that number are a lot of people that were certain about Islam and are still Muslim, but they're not. You know, they see, like, I see where atheists are coming from. Going from a position to thinking atheism is absolutely ridiculous to still thinking it's wrong, but I see why somebody would be an atheist. You know what I mean? Not, you know, nobody is going to dedicate, I mean, not nobody. Most people will not dedicate their entire life to Islam if they're only 99% sure about it, right? So that doubt is a huge win, even if that person never becomes an atheist. That's a baby step. And the good thing about that baby step is, unlike reform, which is not a baby step at all, is a step in the right direction. Sorry, it's not a baby step, it's a step in the wrong direction. It's jumping from one delusion to another. But this baby step of doubt is intellectually honest. You're not lying to people about the meaning of verses just because we want them to be less harmful to you. I mean, it's a very selfish thing to do, to basically say, like, hey, this is bullshit, but let me replace this bullshit with another bullshit so that you're not a threat to me, and that's all you care about. Basically, you're not caring for the individual and what they believe in. You just want to make sure that they're not a threat to you. So the doubt position is intellectually honest. You're not lying to people about their own scripture, and it's not necessarily you're not demanding atheism and nothing else. And there's another smaller baby step even before doubt. So I give you one baby step, but here's another baby step. That even is a smaller baby step than doubt itself, and that's also a win. And that's an even bigger circle than that. So we have a smaller circle, that people that have completely left Islam, and that's a big circle. Like, we have a lot of people that we have ex-Muslim movement is growing faster than ever. But then it become a bigger circle when it's people with that have doubts about Islam, and now a much bigger circle, which are Muslims. That are still 100% certain that Islam is true, still 100% sure that atheism is absolutely ridiculous position to have, but after talking to atheists, they accept atheists. They accept atheists. They don't demonize them. They don't see them as inferior. They see that it's possible for us to have very passionate, friendly disagreements and talk about those disagreements and still be able to get along.
One of the things that I found interesting that you said is, you mentioned that there's a community of ex-Muslims, and I've seen that term a number of times myself. I'm not, and perhaps this is mistaken, but I'm not sure that I've seen a community of ex-Hindus or ex-Buddhists or people identifying themselves in this way. So is there any way that you could explain why, for instance, there's been a move to create or to publicize an identity of ex-Muslim as opposed to, let's say, ex-Hindu, ex-Buddhist, maybe even ex-Christian?
I think the more cult-like and more oppressive your former community has been, the more you identify specifically with that community, right? So a lot of, a lot of people are, for example, are against identity politics, and so am I, unless your identity is being used as a target, right? So you might not see that many people that identify, for example, as ex-Christian, but you do see people identify as ex-Mormon or ex-Jehovah's Witness, because within the Christian community, being a more like the Mormon community is a little bit more of a, or being Jehovah's Witness especially is something. Ex-Jehovah is leaving that community is more looked down upon. There's more your family hating on your community, also, shaming you, highlighting you as somebody that needs to be hated, as somebody that went the wrong way. And because of the reaction to you leaving those Jehovah's Witness or Mormon communities is more, that's why you see, I guess, them also getting together, because they have their own unique problems when it comes to leaving their community. You see them getting together, and when you get together, you come up with a label for you to identify each other, right? So I think when you have unique challenges leaving a community, there's always a natural desire for people that have to deal with those unique challenges to come up with a way for them to find each other and help each other deal with those unique challenges, right? And sorry. And obviously, I think most people know that the challenges with leaving Islam is very much high up there when it comes to communities that is challenging to leave. So much so that the punishment for apostasy in Islam is death, according to Islamic hadiths, right? So given the amount of shunning, the amount of discrimination, and the amount of abandonment by your own family, the amount of ostracizing and everything that the people that will leave Islam have to deal with, I think it's pretty natural for them to come up with a label and find each other and make communities specifically to the people that have to deal with those challenges.
So you wouldn't say, so once again, that argument that you made makes a lot of sense, but I was wondering if you might comment on an additional point that had come to my mind as another possibility why someone might be identifying themselves as ex-Muslim. What about the possibility that Muslims, especially living in Western countries, that Islam is kind of a stigmatized identity, that if you're associated with Islam, maybe you're suspected of being a terrorist, or maybe you're suspected of harboring some abhorrent beliefs, and that as a way of dealing with the social stigmatization in particular Western societies, you would say, I'm ex-Muslim.
Because no. I do not buy that at all. The problems that you have to deal with. Okay, first of all, most of the bigotry Muslims have to deal with, you don't get rid of that. Okay, so when you have to, the people that are against Islam as an idea but are not against Muslims as a group of people, right? They have intellectual disagreements with Muslims. They're not hating on an entire group of people, right? But the people, the bigots, the anti-Muslim bigots, right? Not they, again, I'm not saying not racist, that doesn't make sense. Bigots, they are against a certain group of people, and usually you leave your ideology that is not relevant to them. The fact that you come from a certain country is enough for them to hate on you. So being a Muslim or not being Muslim, most ex-Muslims are in the same camp, same target of bigots that Muslims are. Like, so the people that their agenda is to hate on people that come from Pakistan or from Iran or come from Saudi Arabia, your ideology really doesn't affect their hatred towards you. But even if it does to some of them, the amount of shit that you have to deal with for abandoning Islam as a religion, as an ideology, from your own community, from your own family, from your own friends, from the people that you grew up with, is a hell of a lot more than what you experience from anti-Muslim bigotry in the United States. I mean, people I can't imagine. People have been kicked out of their houses from their mother has been telling them that they're dead to them. There's been honor killings. There are people. I mean, ex-Muslim movement is not something that is just growing in the United States. We have a huge millions of atheists, secret atheists in Saudi Arabia. What anti-Muslim bigotry exists in Saudi Arabia? In Iran, is there anti-Muslim bigotry in Iran? The anti-Islam movement in Iran is huge. The hatred for religion is huge. Atheists are growing in Malaysia. Is there anti-Muslim bigotry in Malaysia? Atheists are growing in Indonesia. Atheist bloggers are being hacked to death in Bangladesh, a very Muslim country. Is there anti-Muslim bigotry in Bangladesh? How is ex-Muslim movement growing in so many Islamic countries if the main cause of that is anti-Muslim bigotry?
Oh, it's an interesting point, although perhaps in thinking, I still don't have a solution myself. I'm trying to figure things out.
I'm sure you could find examples for everything, like anecdotal example. I'm saying every rare scenario that you could come up with, there might be something that somebody that you might come with a story that that might justify a certain trend. But I can tell you that anecdotal stories do not just does not necessarily represent the huge growth of people abandoning Islam. I mean, you have to understand that I wish I had the numbers here.
Well, do you have any sense of, in terms of you mentioned that Atheist Republic has maybe over 2 million followers. Do you have any, and I know you don't have exact figures available, do you have any ability to estimate what percentage of those people are from a Muslim background, just very roughly?
Well, I mean, until a few years ago, the #1 country that our fan base came from was Pakistan. So the number, I don't know what it is right now. I can check, but I think I can check later and let you know. But I think now it's the United States. But I mean, some of our top countries, our fan base are from Egypt, Indonesia, Philippines is high up there. That's a Christian country. It's very interesting because the more religious the countries are, the bigger our fan base are from them. This is what roughly, like, we don't get much fan base from Scandinavian countries, and I think the reason is that, I mean, atheism is so normal in some places where there's not that much point into activism. I mean, we do get fan base from there, especially people in countries where religion does not influence their life, that care about people that religion does influence their life, right? I mean, but the thing is that the more the atheists in countries where religion is forced on them and influences their day-to-day lives, the more that influence is experienced, the more atheists feel the need to be louder and find outlets to be able to express themselves and fight back against it. And that's why I think the more religious countries are, the more we get. I mean, obviously it depends on the population of the country as well. But if you adjust per capita, it does seem that the more religious a country is, the more fans we get from it, the more followers we get from those countries.
Okay, I was wondering if you might comment on one other topic that's related to some of the points that you've been making. Some people will argue, and I'm not sure to what extent this is true, but I mean, I think it's a plausible argument to some extent, that there is a relationship between atheism and certain forms of Western identity, perhaps even white identity. So there's this idea that Europe is a Western country, or Europe is in Europe there's Western civilization, which is rational and secular by nature, and to an extent, attacks on the Islamic religion are really geared primarily to kind of attacking a group of people that is seen as threatening to Western civilization, either in the form of immigrants or either in the context of a war on terror. Would you mind commenting on that? So some people might say, for instance, Geert Wilders, or Ayan Hirsi Ali, or maybe even like Imam Tawhidi, for instance, they kind of are positioning themselves within what they might conceive of as a civilizational conflict between, let's say, Islam and the West, and they kind of.
Yeah, I don't see my fight against Islam, and I think the fight against Islam is not a battle between Islam and the West. I see it as a battle between Islam and the planet. Islam is a cancer. It's a disease that is inflicted on the whole human race, not just the West. In fact, the victims of Islam are mostly in Islamic countries, not in the West, right? And the fight against Islam is also from within Islamic countries by atheists and secular activists, not from outside. And I think those are the people on the front line. I guess when it comes to fighting bad ideas in general, what happened was the most recent successful movement that we had was in the 1800s, and which was, again, going back to the Enlightenment era, and which popularized a lot of this fight back against, faith-based thinking, or against any other thing that's irrational, popularizing scientific thinking, rational thinking. But that it wasn't this is not something that happened for the first time. We have other examples that happened in history in other places, but that was, I guess, one of the most recent huge ones that has helped humanity as a whole for a very long time. I mean, all of us are benefiting from that era a lot more than most people appreciate. But because that era happened to have started in Europe, and people see it as a Western thing, but the thing is that the whole planet benefit. It did happen in Europe, but good ideas are good ideas, and they belong to the world. It doesn't belong to the West, right? If free speech is a good idea, free speech is a good idea everywhere. It's not a good idea just in Western countries. If democracy is a good idea, it's a good idea everywhere. It's not just a good idea in Western countries. If equal rights for men and women is a good idea, it's a good idea everywhere, not just in Western countries, right?
And I just had just because I probably will have to wrap up soon, even though I've been really enjoying this conversation, but I wanted to make sure to get in one more question. Do you see your movement, or the Atheist Republic, as kind of an outgrowth of the New Atheism? And are there particular figures, New Atheists or otherwise, that have been particularly influential in terms of your own embrace of atheist activism?
Okay, how would you define New Atheism?
I have, according to my understanding, and it's not an area of expertise for me, but there are particular figures like Sam Harris, like Richard Dawkins, like Daniel Dennett, and one of the things that they wanted to do is perhaps take a more aggressive stance when it comes to religion, not, for instance, merely not endorsing religion themselves, but kind of publicly shaming people maybe who adopt religious beliefs, and kind of trying to stigmatize religion in society.
I don't think they're shaming people. I think they're calling out bad ideas.
Okay, so for instance, not tolerating bad ideas in a society, but going ahead and making kind of an active movement to combat those ideas.
So if you're defining New Atheism as a move, again, New Atheism is not. Atheism is nothing but I don't like your belief in God. I just also want to make that clear. But if New Atheism is defined as a movement that does not tolerate bad ideas and actively tries to fight them, then obviously that's a great thing, right? And if New Atheism means people being vocal about their atheism and not holding back and expressing it, normalizing it, that's obviously a great thing. And if New Atheism is defined like that, I think I'm part of that New Atheist movement. And if the main people that led that charge, if you mentioning the people that Daniel Dennett, Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins, and Christopher Hitchens, if you're talking, if that's how you define it, well, I've read all of their, well, not, I read a book from each one, all of these people. Not a couple of books from all of these people, and I see if that's how it's defined, if their contributions is what defines the New Atheist movement, then I don't think many people, many atheists can. I mean, I think to me it's pretty obvious that their contribution has benefited us and everyone else. Their books are their books and their advocacy has contributed a lot. From all the books that I've read, I think one of my favorite ones is Breaking the Spell by Daniel Dennett, which influenced me the most, which is one of the most underrated one from the four of them. Even though when it comes to free will and stuff, I'm more on Sam Harris's side. Sam Harris's way of thinking and analyzing information has been very helpful to me. Richard Dawkins' no bullshit attitude has been very refreshing and always I think has empowered a lot of people to be not tiptoeing around their views and encouraging them to be more outspoken, less apologetic about what they see as a problem. And obviously Christopher Hitchens is just always fun to listen to in debates and stuff. But I mean, they're all have been doing. Obviously, there are many things that everybody, they say that we might not agree with, but on average, I think all of them have contributed a lot, if that's how you define it. I just think, I mean, if New Atheism is a name for people not hiding their atheism, not thinking it's something that they need to not mention, and if it's a movement towards more people being open about it, more normalizing it, making it more accepting, I would, then that's fantastic, and I want to, and then I support New Atheism, and I really don't think when you said like shaming people, I don't think that's what it is. We all have bad ideas, and we all hold views. You hold some views, I hold some views that are absolutely ridiculous, right? I don't know which views that I hold right now are absolutely ridiculous, because if I knew which ones they were, I wouldn't be holding them right now, right? But I rely on other people pointing them out to me. I don't know which one of my views are wrong. I just know there are some of my views that are wrong. And the only way that I could find them, is by, the best way, it's not the only way. The best way that I could find them is by getting other people's help in criticizing me and pointing them out to me. So I think people should see that when you point out people's ridiculous beliefs, people should not see it as an attack. I think that people should appreciate it, even if they don't agree with the critique. You should want people to attack your views. What better way is there for you to recognize which one of your views are wrong?
Okay, Armin, that has been very, very, very helpful, and I really want to say thank you so much for sharing your views with me. I think they're unique views. Obviously, they're having an impact on the world, and it's really helpful for me to be able to appreciate them. And I think it's really going to enrich my research. So thank you very much.
Atheist Republic's mission is to give atheists around the world a louder voice. In order for us to be able to continue the Atheist Republic, we need your help. If we reach 100 patrons, we'll finally be able to afford all our costs. Help us get there.
Sorry, I had to record again because I forgot to thank you for your time. So just wanted to add it at the very end.
Thank you for your time.
No, thank you for this was fun.